Just on tonight's show, the guest on tonight's show will be Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster. So, without further ado, what we're going to do is going to bring in our guest Bob Chapman from the International Forecaster, who has a wealth of information. So we're going to bring in Bob and have a chat with Bob. Good evening, Bob. How are you?
Well, fine, thank you, and thank you for having me.
No problem, Bob. Bob, what we normally do before we get into any details is we always ask our guests, we get a bit of information about your background and how you got involved and what you got involved in and your knowledge. Can you go into, how you know about what you know and the global elite and how you came about it and all that kind of stuff?
Surely. First of all, I'm 75 years old, and in 1882, my family immigrated from Dublin to the United States and to Boston, and I grew up in Somerville, which is abuts Boston, and for over 100 years it's been a community where many Irish immigrants have settled. I went to school at Somerville High School. I went to Northeastern University in Boston. Although I was accepted when I was in the 9th grade to go to Harvard, I decided not to. I didn't think I fit there, and be as it may. I was drafted into the U.S. Army during the early 1950s, and because of my acumen, I spent several years in U.S. Army Counter Intelligence. And most of those years were in Europe spying on the Russians.
Okay.
What's that?
No, that's sounds quite dangerous.
And, anyway, I spent 7-8 years in Europe altogether, but not all of it with the government. And I speak several languages, which is unusual for Americans. And I've lived in various parts of the world, in the Caribbean, Mexico, Latin America, Canada, Africa, and I lived in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, when it was a very nice place to live. And that was a few years that I lived there. But the point is, I've lived in many places, not just visited. And so it gives you a different perspective on life. Europeans are exposed to other Europeans from other countries and other cultures. That doesn't happen too often to most Americans. Be as it may, I got involved in intelligence, and the first thing I found out was that the U.S. and the British government had broken the Japanese diplomatic code in 1937, and that's been declassified since in 1968. And what the Americans did was they allowed the Japanese, actually pushed them into it, to do what they did at Pearl Harbor. And I was shocked. I mean, I believed in the American government like everybody else, or most people at least. And so it changed my whole life. So when I left the government service, I went back to university, and then I went into the stock brokerage business. I was in it for 29 years. I was the largest gold, silver share broker in the United States and maybe the world. When I closed my company up, I had 6,000 clients, which is quite a few. Most brokers have 300 or 400 clients, if they've got that. And so that, along with my travels, my languages, I retired. And playing golf and tennis every day was not for me. I was 52 years old. And so I started writing the International Forecaster. It's been about 22 years. And I'm going back. We have the fastest growing newsletter about business, finance, economics, and social issues all over the world. In the world. And our site is visited by millions of people every month. We do 40 hours of radio programming on other people's programs. That means I don't have to think. I just have to answer questions. Okay. And I'm reaching millions and millions of people all over the world. And our subscriber base is from everywhere. And I'm happy to say that because, you know something? Everybody's got the same problems you have.
Yeah.
And we have. And so if we don't do this whole thing together, we're all going up the spout together.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's a brief background there.
Okay, and so let's go forward a bit now with that. And also, well, talking about the global elite, how much have you looked into the global elite and what they've been doing, obviously based on the work that you've been doing in the financial markets?
I became interested, and it's probably the thing, more than anything else, that propelled me into the stock brokerage business. Because I realized, and this is an educational process that's encompassed of 50 years, I realized who was doing what to whom and who was behind it all. Mm. And when I discovered that, I became interested on the quest that I'm on today.
Okay.
Most people my age are unhealthy, and they sit around the house waiting to die. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make life as miserable as possible for the Illuminati, the black nobility of Europe, and all of the bad people who work with them.
Yeah. Okay, and the current situation at the moment, which is quite dire, give us a rundown from the States first, and then we'll move over to Europe.
Well, first of all, starting in 2000, and incidentally, I've made some fantastic markets, and I've had people long gold and silver assets of all kinds for the last 11 years, and they've done extraordinarily well keeping what money they do have for investment purpose together. They do make money, lots of it. A lot of it's offset by the inflation. The problem in 2000 was they had to come up with another idea to keep the thing going, and so they created a real estate bubble.
Yeah.
And that included allowing people to have homes that shouldn't have had them. And they couldn't pay the payments. And the bankers thought that was wonderful because they would make the loans, and then the brokerage houses would securitize them into what they called MBSs and CDOs. Those are bonds with mortgages and parts of mortgages inside the bonds. And they sold them to people, mostly professionals, and 60% of them were sold in Europe. And one of the very suspicious things that happened during that time was that these European professionals bought these bonds, which have become known as toxic waste. And the reason why is they were rated AAA, and they should have been rated BBB, and a bond that was selling for $1,000 6 or 7 years ago is now selling for $50 or $100. So it was complete fraud by Wall Street and banking in the United States. And we have never seen a civil lawsuit or a criminal action against any of these lenders, some of which are European, like Deutsche Bank. And so that's what brought about the credit crisis. It also brought about the Federal Reserve, which is a privately owned entity in the United States, creating, starting in 2000, trillions of dollars out of thin air. They have that ability in their charter.
Yeah.
And so anyway, what's happened is that we have a situation where banks have lots of money because the Fed gave it to them, and they make on that money. The Fed lends them money at 1.5%, and then they lend it back to the Fed at 2.5%. So they get paid 2% for doing nothing. And the major corporations have lots of cash, but they're not investing it. They're not helping the people. They're just taking the money and going into the markets and speculating and using leverage. Now, they used to use 100 or 200 to 1. The banks used to use 70 to 1.
Yeah.
Historic banks have used 9 to 1 for the last 500 years. Now they're using 40 to 1 because they have to. Otherwise, they'll go under. And they're rigging markets. And how they rig them is they're the ones who make the rules.
Yeah.
They're the ones who own the reserve. Situation where you have this mountainous debt by the federal government as well as the states, municipalities. And the municipalities can go bankrupt, which many of them are going to do over the remainder of the course of the year. States can't go bankrupt. I guess what they do on their bonds that they sold is to tell the people, we'll pay you later. There's probably 35, 40 states in the country that are on the verge of bankruptcy. That is bankrupt. The major banks and brokerage firms are bankrupt.
Bob,
the same is probably true to a great extent in Europe.
Bob, if I just touch base with you there, we have a host of questions come in from our listeners, so we're going to start throwing a few questions over to you, if you don't mind. The first one is going to be from Dave. Sorry to cut in on you there, Bob, but our listeners have a host of questions they want to pick your brain on, so if you don't mind. The first question from Dave is regarding the new world currency, which is the Bankcor. And Dave wants to know, do you know about the Bankcor, and what do you think about this new global currency?
Well, first of all, the name Bankcor came from that reprobate known as Lord Keynes, the Keynesian method of economics, which I call corporatist fascist teaching. And almost every central bank and government in the world follows the teachings of John Maynard Keynes. They don't work. And everybody involved knows they don't work. But they don't care about it because periodically they destroy an economy and economies, sometimes simultaneously, and many of them sometimes alone. But the Bankcor was just a word that Keynes made it. And there's never been anything like a Bankcor. The only thing that's close to it is the SDR, which cannot be backed by gold, which is issued by the IMF. And it'll never work as long as it's not backed by gold. This past weekend, George Soros, who is one of the nastiest creatures but God put on this earth, he had a meeting of all of the people from the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Builder, the Royal Institute, the Committee of 30, the Committee of 300, the Black Nobility in Europe. All the head people were there putting together the ideas for a new world currency. And I can say is God help us. But if it's not backed by gold, it isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Because you get countries today like China Russia, Iran, Brazil, India, who do not want to have another fiat, which means unbacked, international reserve currency. They don't want it. And I think they're going to find out they can't sell it. But that's where this thing's leading up to. And they've been working on this for a long, long time. In fact, if you go back to 1944 in July, at the Bretton Woods Conference at Mount Washington, New Hampshire, you will find that the basics were laid for the buildup of the United States and its destruction, and the removal of gold from the U.S. backing on currency. And, of course, one war after another. You know, all of these things are planned. They have hundreds of thousands of people with PhDs working 24/7, 5 days to destroy your life and enslave you. And if you don't believe that, you're missing the whole point.
I know that there's quite a good setup from the global elite. We'll pass you over to Steve. There's another, as we say, we have a host of questions here for you, Bob. So we'll shoot them at you, and if you can go through them. Steve?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions here, Bob, and well, some of them you've actually answered, but the one in relation to Bretton Woods, the question was, is Bob aware of the White Hat's report of Bretton Woods, and your thoughts on the same, read the accuracy, i.e. if Bush Sr. is to be exposed as a crook?
Well, Bush Sr. has been a crook for many, many years. He's also a pervert, too, and as his son, the one that was president.
Yeah.
I don't know about the other ones. But, you know, it is common knowledge in the United States that these people are crooks. And they all work in the same group. Sometimes they're in different political parties or coming from different directions, but they're all working together. And these are the same people who financed Adolf Hitler, especially the Bush family, the Walkers, etc., and Averell Harriman and so on. And that was their job.
Yeah.
And that's how Hitler was financed to power, in part. And people who study, and this is really a long educational process, you're getting it in a capsulization. I spent over 50 years studying it, 55 years for that matter. And so it's been a long time coming. And you have to understand what these people are up to. Not only are they crooks, they want to deprive you of your freedom. And that's what's been going on in America with the stock market bubble, the real estate bubble, the problems with the municipalities and the states and the federal government and individuals. And look what's going on in Europe. Countries that are on the verge of bankruptcy. And I've been on the radio in Ireland before, and in Paris, and in several cities in Germany. In Greece, I've been on innumerable times. So what's the bottom line? The bottom line is those countries, like Ireland, that have been ravaged by these criminals, who made all these loans, knowing they should have never made them in the first place, for money that was created out of thin air. They should all be told to take a hike. Those 6 countries should default on all their debt. They should go back to their original currencies. And they should issue those currencies at a low rate so they can compete in the international market. And during that process, you will probably see a incidence of tariffs throughout the world, like there used to be in a large way, on goods and services. And it has to come, because free trade and globalization, which is British mercantilism of the 16, 17, 18, and 1900s, it's just put together with a different label. advanced economies that have good standards of living cannot compete with people who live in economies where they're given slave wages. And that's what's been going on. Europe, Ireland, England, the United States are being destroyed because they're being inundated with cheap goods from other countries. The United States, with the transnational corporations, what they do is they go to, say, China, and they make something, and they send it back to those countries, and those countries can't compete on price. And sometimes the prices are quite a bit lower. And so that puts people out of work. And if you have that going on, and at the same time, you have bubbles breaking. I wrote an article 14 years ago during the Master Treaty conversations, hearings.
Yeah.
And they said that they were going to have one interest rate for all Eurozone countries. I wrote that article saying, if there's anything that guarantees the destruction of the Eurozone, and probably eventually the European Union, it's one interest rate fits all. It can't. Every country is at a different stage of development. And sometimes, within countries, you have sections that are in different stages of development. So I knew it was going to work. So predicting its failure was not very difficult. And of course, there was no European Constitution, and I don't have to tell you about that. You know all about it, because they shoved it down your throats twice.
That's right.
And you get sold out.
Yeah.
Well, but just in relation to the defaulting, I mean, we all know Iceland has defaulted, and I mean, what do you think in the long term will happen to Iceland? Because one of our listeners says that if we default now, we will probably lose our natural resources, and that is their master plan, and we need to have the alleged debt written off. Just wondering what your thoughts are.
Well, wait a minute. What resource are they going to take away from you? If you default, you don't owe them anything. They might be mad with you and might say you can't and might invade you. And if they do that, will you fight back? Do you want to live the next 50 to 100 years in poverty under the heel of European bankers who you're bailing out because they made bad loans? Does that seem fair to you, for you? I don't think so.
No, it's definitely not fair. And I mean, I don't want it for me. I don't
so
want
don't
it for my children.
And your political parties have sold you out just like every political party in every other country. And so what happens after that? We have no recourse, as you have in the United States today. No recourse. Because these people behind the scenes have bought everybody, except a handful of people. So the American voter, he votes for Tweedly-Doo and Tweedly-Dum. And they're both controlled by the Rothschilds, the Queen of England, whoever. And they do exactly as they want, and you have no representation. Court system is useless in America, as it is in many other countries.
Yeah, it's corrupt.
So what do? You have a revolution is what you do. You live on your knees. Take your choice.
Yeah, I think the revolution idea is something that will happen, I think, down the line. I have a question for you here, Bob, from One World Scam, and he wants to know if you can ask Bob about the QE3, and will that bring us towards hyperinflation?
First of all, inflation 2.5 years ago in America was 14 3/8%. The government said it was 5.5. Deleveraging came, and the market went down, but interest rates went down as well. And so during that period of time, things cooled off and got back. This is real inflation now, not what the government talks about. Cooled down to about 4 or 5%. And then they really started to put money into the economy. QE1. $1.7 trillion came from the Fed. $850 billion came from the U.S. legislature. QE2. We're not finished with that yet. And you will see there will be about $1.7 trillion again. And last December, the legislature approved $862 billion in stimulus. QE3, I don't think the legislature will approve another $862 billion or anything at all, which means the Fed's going to have to come up with, and they create money and credit out of thin air.
Yeah.
And they're going to come up with $2.5 trillion. That means, based on Q1, inflation, real inflation will be over 14% this year. QE2 is on the pipeline for next year along with the stimulus too. That should take it up to 25%. If you have QE3 in the method I just told you, you will have 50%. It constitutes hyperinflation. Anything from 50% or higher. That's hyperinflation. That is where America is headed.
Okay. Steve, you have another question for Bob? Thanks,
yeah,
Bob.
This is kind of it's obviously moving away from that ever so slightly. But Bob, do you think World War III is a possibility if Iran is invaded?
About 9 months prior to 9/11, I wrote an article saying that there will be an event which was created by the powers behind government, which will be used to start war in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm the only one in the world who did that.
Yeah.
I was right within 33 days. I said October the 16th. I didn't know exactly when. I didn't know what they were going to do. But they were going to do something because they needed those wars to distract people from the financial and economic problems they had. Now, you see a U.S. MI6 Mossad operation going on in the Middle East. That would happen. Those people didn't revolt because they had high prices for food, etc. They weren't very happy. But the whole thing was planned and executed by those organizations. It's a distraction. In the process, Mr. Mubarak left. What did he leave? Because he didn't want them, the U.S. and British, etc., to attack Iran. That's why he was kicked out. The reason that Libya has the problems it has is Mr. Gaddafi would not join AFRICOM. He wanted to take the oil that they had in Libya, nationalize it, and give shares to every Libyan in the oil company. I mean, that sent BP and Shell, which is the Queen of Holland, into gyrations that you've never seen before. He also had a private, public bank that was not interconnected or privately owned banking system. Stop that. Besides, they want to steal the Libyan people's 143.8 tons of gold. They also want to get hold of the 4 aquifers that are under the country, plus be able to sell the oil and make profit on it. The people who are running the rebel opposition are CIA. In fact, the guy that's running the thing, he lived in Virginia for 20 years. He's a CIA operative. I know who he is. And the people they're using, these rebels who got bombed by NATO the other day, shows you how stupid they are. And that was in error. they're Al-Qaeda and Taliban. So, need I say any more? The wonder is Bahrain will go down. The Shiites there, as are the Iranians. And now the Saudis are very, very frightened that maybe the Americans will save them. We already know that they're going to take the people out of Yemen. And so why has this happened in the Middle East? It's been done deliberately. Number one, as a distraction to all of the financial and economic problems in Europe, the UK, and Europe, and the United States. They are preparing chaos in the Middle East so that nobody will argue with them when they march on Iran. And that answers your question. That's where the Third World War is going to be. And this is a prelude to it. You're already into it. These people are insane.
They're psychopaths, to put a fine point on it, I think.
Well, I always call them sociopaths, some of which are psychopaths.
Yeah.
And nobody knows them more intimately than I do.
Okay, Bob, we had a question on JP Morgan and silver, and I'm not too up on what's happening there, but I believe you might know something about that.
Well, I certainly do. I've only been doing it for 52 years.
I don't insult your intelligence. I was just saying...
What happened was this. Bear Stearns went bankrupt. They forced him into bankruptcy because they did something I won't go into that the Illuminati didn't like. And they had a big short position in silver. So J.P. Morgan Chase, which is one of the owners of the Federal Reserve, the best owner, along with Goldman Sachs and Citigroup, HSBC, and others. And that ownership came back in 1910 to 1913. Anyway, they get stuck with this short position. So Morgan decided that they weren't going to use it to their best advantage. And they at HSBC just kept on shorting. Naked. They had nothing behind the short, but they had good word. They didn't have the silver. They leveraged 45 to 1. Right now, they're offside probably, the two of them, $1 billion. I think here at $55 to $60 silver, which is not where it's at now, it's about 40. They'll be offside 140 billion. The big question is, are they going to let it go to $100 an ounce? And the answer is maybe. Because they're so arrogant. Who's going to pay the bill? They'll do one of three things. They'll either make partial payment in dollars, because they don't have the silver. They might default in total, or the U.S. government may pay the debt. The American people. Well, that's not going to go down very well with the American people, because they're already deeply disturbed about what the government's been doing, and banking and Wall Street and insurance and pharmaceutical companies, transnational corporations have been doing to them, because they're finding out what's been going on all these years, all these lies. So, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but my guess is there'll be a default. And what'll happen? They'll stop trading in silver and probably gold on the COMEX, because they won't be able to match orders. Everybody will be asking for delivery, and the COMEX and those two banks don't have the silver. The gold silver options will be worthless. All the derivatives will be worthless. LBMA in London will be upside down. And the two exchange-traded funds, GLD, SLV, will go under. And the people will lose all their money. And that's the way this whole thing is headed. And I want to say this, and I say it conservatively. I'm one of the 5 top people in the world on this subject. I know who the other 4 are, but I'm giving some leeway. The point is, I know what I'm talking about. And this is where this whole thing's headed. And what will that do to gold? I don't know, $3,000 an ounce? 2,400. Back in 1980, the U.S. government said that inflation was such. Since that time, using U.S. government official bogus figures, gold should be selling at $2,400 an ounce. And the real market, the real making figures is $8,000 an ounce. Well, you say to yourself, so why is it selling there? Well, it's because the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, and all the other central banks banded together and sold most of their gold to suppress the price because they want endless fiat currencies so they can keep on stealing money from everybody.
Mm.
And that's what it's all about.
That's incredible. A question here, Bob, Steve?
Yeah, one of the questions in, Bob. Roughly, when do you see the dollar collapsing, i.e. when the media will actually make an announcement to that effect?
Only God knows that.
Okay. We'll have to try and get God on.
I am not smart enough to give you that answer, but I'll tell you this. What will be their solution? And the dollar's going to go down again next week. It's been going down. It's going to test 71.18 on the USDX. For those of you who don't know, that's major currencies versus the dollar, U.S. dollar index. Support is at 74, which it's approaching. 72, 71.18. I think it'll be broken. And once that happens, I think they'll have a big meeting like the Smithsonian in the early 70s in Washington, at the Plaza Accords of 85 in Paris, at the Louvre Accord in 1987 at the Louvre in Paris, and they will get together and they will revalue and devalue all currencies against each other. We will have multilateral debt default settlement. And that means that the dollar, once it's sorted out, can become the world currency again, the world reserve currency. There's a missing link, and that missing link is the Illuminati knows that they don't use gold, it's not going to work. And they'll try first to set up a currency that's not gold backed, and it won't work. And they will have a currency, whatever it may be, with 25% gold backing. And if they don't, they will have financial and economic chaos. And everybody will know what they're up to because they're listening to programs like this one that is shouting the message throughout the world and on the internet. And that's why I do what I do.
Excellent. Brilliant. I think that answers the question on the dollar. What do you think about the euro, Bob? What do you think of the lifespan of the euro with what's going on?
It's so difficult to say when the euro is going to go under. When they expedite it, have those 6 nations, which Ireland's one of them, default. The game's over. Nobody would love it more than the Germans, the people from the Netherlands, the Dutch, the French, and the Austrians, who are paying all the bills. They're the ones who are lending money to the 6 countries that are in trouble. They'll never get the money back. But the bankers will get paid, and that's what the problem is. And you take the power from the bankers, and you do that by not paying the debt. It's very simple.
Because what we're finding, these austerity measures which they keep talking about and bringing in, and every week there's something else coming in, trying to get more money off the taxpayer, and we'll have less in our pocket to spend, and people are losing their houses, and families are finding it very hard to feed their children and everything else, and we feel that there is something around the corner coming. Whether it's a revolution, I don't know. But I think there is something definitely in the pipeline over here that something is going to happen, because you can only take so much before you break, and you have to get up and do something. As to what's going to happen, we don't really know.
Well, I don't think anybody does. But if you logically follow the steps forward and you see the history of what's gone on for the past 1,000 years by these people. And of course, there's been additions and subtractions over 1,000 years. But this is nothing new. They've done this time after time. Look at 1348, the collapse of the Lombard system. Only some 40 years after they killed off the Crusaders who ran the banking system before that. And they bankrupted it.
Yeah.
The Hanseatic League in the early 1600s, they did the same thing, looking for world, at that time it was Europe, total control. They want to totally control everybody. And by bringing them economically and financially to their knees is their method of doing so.
Yeah. We've noticed on the internet generally, Bob, that a lot of people are saying about they want to leave the States because it's becoming more of a police state. Have you heard anything about, the kind of mass emigration, if you want to put it that way, or the amount of people wanting to leave the States because of what's going on over there?
Well, I get a lot of letters to that effect because I've lived all over the world. And I currently live in a foreign country, and I don't tell anybody where I live. My own family doesn't know where I'm at. Because the government has threatened me a new rule of death. So I believe them. I used to work for them. And so when they tell me that if you don't shut up, you're going to have a short lifespan, I believe them. And so many people have come to me, and I tell them where, where they would be more safe. Depending upon their situation, everybody's different. But there's lots of people leaving America. And the first thing they do is go to a country where they can get a passport and residency and become a citizen. And it usually, in most places, takes 5 years to 6 years. In Switzerland, it takes 14 years. And I point that out because some of them are longer. And that's what people are doing. A lot of Italian Americans and Irish Americans are getting dual passports. So if things get pretty nasty, they gotta dodge. And yes, a lot of people are leaving the country. And you can't blame them, because not everybody has the intestinal fortitude to be a warrior.
And do you feel that's the way it's going to go over there as well, Bob?
Say that again?
Do you feel that's the way it's going to go over there in the States as well? The uprising on the streets? Yeah.
For a short period of time, not many people will leave. People will leave, but not many. There's 320 million people in the country. I mean, if 1 million or 5 million left, even 10 million, it wouldn't be that big a thing. But people are leaving. And most people in America, they don't have a clue to what's going on.
Yeah.
They think everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, I know.
And some of them are PhDs and masters, and these people are not stupid. They just don't get it.
Yeah. Exactly. I have said that, and Steve has said it before. This is nothing got to do with intelligence. It's just whether you get it or not. Whether you get it. It's not an intelligent thing. But I was going to say to you, Bob, I'm just watching the time, and I know you won't be staying on too long. But what words of advice would you give the people in Europe, in Ireland, and the people of Europe, from a financial point of view, with money and everything else? What would be your words of wisdom on that?
Well, to start off with, if I were in the 4 countries that are paying the bills for these debts, they've already committed themselves for $1 trillion. The G20 meeting last week, Mrs. Merkel said, no, we're not going to go for $2 trillion. In fact, she said we want to cut it back $300 billion, because the CDU, which is her party, got the crap kicked out of them in Hamburg, which is her own constituency. So they're rethinking this thing. What they should say is, no, we're not going to supply all those loans, because we're never going to get our money back. We don't want to do it. And at the same time, Ireland, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Belgium should say, no, we're not going to pay those bills. Let the bankers eat it.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should go.
And we've been saying that for quite some time over here that the sovereign debt and the debt of the bankers are two different things.
That's right. And the heck with the bankers. Let them shut it up themselves. They made up all the money out of thin air in the first place. And they should have never made the loans. And they're the professionals. Not the people in office. Not the people on the street. They don't know about high finance.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're talking about right now, in London and in New York City, 95% of the brokers, stockbrokers, and bankers don't have a clue to what we're talking about. I know I was in the industry for 29 years, and I owned my own brokerage firm.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's about, as I say, it's not an intellectual thing. It's about waking up and getting it. I'm just watching the time there, Bob, and I know we have limited time with you. Do you want to give our listeners, do you want to give them your website address and everything, all the information that you wanted to tell us about, and where they can find out more about you and what you do?
Well, they've heard my background, but the International Forecaster is about business, finance, economics, social and political issues all over the world. And we have columns on England and Ireland and Europe and Germany and Costa Rica, Thailand, you name it, we do it. You can get a free introductory copy by going to our site. The address is theinternationalforecaster.com. The International, FORECASTER.com. We have another one as well, www.intforecaster.com, intforecaster.com. We also make recommendations on interest rates, currencies, stock market, and of course gold and silver shares, which is my specialty for over 50 years. We have an email address. If you email us, we'll send you a copy. We'll give you all the information in gold and silver stocks. Doesn't cost you anything.
Excellent.
All you have to do is email. And that address is Bob, B-O-B, at intforecaster.com. That's Bob at INTFORECSTE.com.
Excellent. Well, on the front page of the OAM website, we also have a banner and a link to the International Forecaster for our listeners. If they want to click on the banner, I'll bring it over there to the website. We know you have limited time, Bob, so we'd just like to thank you for coming on the show and sharing all that information with us and to our listeners. I mean, it's fantastic information that you have there, and you know, we just have to kind of run with the way things are going at the moment and see what happens down, I think, at the end of the tunnel, see what happens there.
All we can do is what we can do, and the best thing is informing people. And anytime you want me back, you just let me know. I'll be happy to do it.
That's fantastic, Bob. Well, I'd just like to thank you for being on there. If you just stay with us for a minute, Bob, we'll just go to a musical break, and we'll be just with you in a minute. Good evening, Bob. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Nice to be here again.
Great, Bob. Thanks for coming on. We do appreciate it. We really do appreciate it. Bob, you've been on the show before with us, and we went through your resume and everything else there, and I'm sure if people want to find out more details about you, they can download the podcast and listen to that previous show. What we're really concerned about at the moment, and what we'd really like to get information from you, is to start getting an update on where we are at the moment financially, globally, and where you see us going. The way the situation is at the moment. We know there's countries having problems. We know Greece is asking for more money. We know Italy is up to their eyeballs in debt. Ireland's struggling as well, along with a few other countries like Portugal and Spain. Can you tell us kind of what's going on, or your perception of what's going on, and what you've came across, and what's happening, and then we kind of take it from there?
Well, I think you have to look at probably the worst case situation which exists in the European Union, specifically in the Eurozone. And I don't have to explain to you because you're Europeans, you know what that's all about.
Yeah.
Greece is the first-rate problem, and they're coming around for the second time looking for an injection of capital, and for that they're going to cut back and in all sorts of ways. The key to which way things are going to go here is the sitting of the German Bundestag, which will come on the 29th, which is this week.
Okay.
And they have to approve, if anybody is going to, per the Supreme Court in Karlsruhe. And I didn't agree with the decision of the Supreme Court, but anyway. And incidentally, there were 500 major businesses that didn't either. So they have to decide whether they're going to allow the European Central Bank to receive money from them in order to assist in the bailout of Greece and perhaps others. And my sources say they think that it will be passed. Well, the last 7 elections during the course of this year, 6 of them were won by parties other than the CDU and the Free Democrats, their partners in government. And even in Mecklenburg, West Pomerania, which is the seat of Mrs. Merkel's constituency, the Free Democrats gets clobbered there. And so the German people, probably somewhere between 58 and 75%, don't want to lend any more money. And if the Bundestag does that, then they're going to be very unhappy. The Senate has already passed legislation akin to what the Bundestag is being asked to pass as well. Now, if the Bundestag says yes, then they are liable to have large demonstrations and even perhaps violence in Germany. The people are really, really mad about this. As mad as I've ever seen them about anything. And I've been there many times. I lived there for 4 years. I speak German. And so that gives, a kind of an inside look at people because you know their culture and you know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
That's not good. On the other hand, if the Bundestag says no, I see the United States and Great Britain have got another war lined up. This time they have Greece and Israel who are going to challenge Turkey because Turkey has war vessels as well as drilling rigs near Cyprus, in the Aegean, near and close to or in the territory of Greece. And I guess what they're going to do is go in and drill and the shooting will start. I don't think it'll last too long. And the reason for that is to, number one, switch the what would you call it, the attention to the war.
Yeah.
And the people within the European Union who want this to happen, that is money flowing to Greece, they'll say, oh, you got to do them, and these Turks are terrible people, and so on and so forth. And what happens next is you have a forced situation upon the Bundestag to go back and change their vote, that sort of thing. Now, if the Bundestag approves and this goes forward, they want to form, well, they already have formed what they call a stability group, and it's out of Luxembourg as opposed to Brussels. And what they want to do is allow all the financing to be done by this group in conjunction with the ECB. Well, what that does is it takes the ability of sovereign countries to be able to run their own finances eventually internally. In other words, the finances in each country will be run by this stability committee. And I forget the initials and the name of it. They've got so many of these things. And they'll be able to issue bonds. And that is not a good thing.
So that's going to be that's going to be controlled centrally.
What's that?
Each country, the finances of each country is going to be controlled by these unelected bureaucrats in this policy group, I suppose, or this group you're talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Ooh, that's bad.
And so they lose their sovereignty. And at the same time, this group can issue bonds. And Germany and others are supposed to buy them, including Ireland. And that's a terrible idea. And it's a part of the move to create consolidation in Europe financially so that they can move on to the one world government. And this is what this is all about. I think you can use the phrase, never waste a crisis.
Yeah.
And that's what they're trying to do here. So Merkel's in the middle. I think she and the CDU are not electable again. And if this legislation is passed, the socialists will run Germany for the next 20 years. I mean, it's political suicide. And what she's doing in the CDU, I'll never know, because she was a communist when she lived in Eastern Germany. So that doesn't fit very well with mindset. I mean, I don't know how you put something like that together. But be as it may, that's the situation right now. And that's a turning point. That's a catalyst. What are they going to do? And so we're going to find out. And we'll find out by the end of the week. So those are the problems that exist.
Okay.
And they're trying to be handled.
So who's going to... Is there going to be referendums for the people of the country to vote for this? Or are we just going to, like our government's going to be just bow down to the IMF and just, agree to it and not even ask the people?
Governments agree to it, don't even ask the people.
That's terrible.
And, they got the same thing, sort of thing brewing in the United States. They had this Budget Extension Act, which is passed. But they have this 12-member committee. Now, being Europeans, you know very well what this 12-person group is going to do. I compare it to three different things historically. The 13th century Star Chamber proceeding, which was nullified and neutralized by the Magna Carta. Then we had the Politburo in Soviet Russia, which is the same thing, bypassing Congress. And then what it's closest to in execution is the 1933 Enabling Act, which the National Socialist Party got passed, and it allowed Adolf Hitler to become a dictator. And this is really what they're after. They want to make the President of the United States a dictator. And so you look at what they're going to do. This is what they're going to do. Not only in this instance, but I think they'll carry on with other issues. They decide what the legislation is going to be. It goes to the House. They can't debate it. They can't filibuster. They can't amend it. It's an up and down vote. And so, if you look at the structure of the American Congress, whether the Senate or the House, 90% of them are bought off by Wall Street banking and transnational corporations. So you know what the result's going to be.
Yeah.
A giant move towards world government and giving dictatorial power to the President of the United States. Something George Washington went way out of his way to avoid when they were putting the country together, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. And you get the same thing in Europe. This stability group is going to bypass everybody until you get a vote. And then from there, what they'll do is they'll consolidate everything. And then what they're going to do after that, in their certain regions, they want to amalgamate everybody into a world government.
Yeah. Well, we are aware of the fact that they want to break down the world into 4 sections, which is the North American Union, the European Union, the South African Union, and the Pacific Union. And then the whole idea is once they have them 4 different entities, then they'll merge them 4 together, and then, hey presto, you have your one world government.
Well, they're having a heck of a time with the North American Union, that's for sure.
Mm.
And they pretty much stopped it for the moment. But these people never give up, and they have endless amounts of money. And it's a pet project of the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderberg Group. And so it's not going to go away. And you can kick it in the pants and knock it down.
Yeah.
But it's not going away.
So you have, so the North American Union, for the listeners who don't know what that is a coalition of the Mexico, Alaska, Mexico, North America, and Canada.
Well, essentially Canada, Mexico, and the U.S.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'll tell you right now, although Canadians don't have really any control of their government, they don't like it. But the Mexicans really don't like it. Really don't like it.
And what's going to happen with the Amero, Bob? Have you heard anything about that?
It's been dead for the last 4 or 5 years, and I don't think it's coming back. They tried it, and they were cut off at the pass, and it just didn't work. They were stopped, just like the North American Union was, but they're still working behind the scenes, making things similar in each country, like weights and measures and how vehicles are built and things like that. And it's all this regulation. It's becoming quite obvious in each section, and particularly the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and perhaps even more so in Europe. This is going to end up in a revolution, because the people are not going to take it.
Well, it depends really on, number one, the people understanding it, and then if they understand it, like we have a big problem over here with apathy, where people will kind of say, oh, well, what can you do? And then that's it. There's no kind of revolution, and there's no kind of let's go up and do something about it. I mean, there has been, we heard about what's going on in Wall Street at the moment, where there's a lot of people demonstrating outside Wall Street and actually probably staying there for a few days and saying enough is enough. Now, we really haven't had anything like that over here in Ireland, to be honest with you. We've had protest marches, but they, you get somebody who talks for about 15, 20 minutes and then everybody goes home after that. So we really don't know when this is. I know that on October the 15th there's a big large assembly globally which they're putting around saying, right, October the 15th will be the day when all countries get up and say no more, that's it. I don't know how successful that's going to be.
I don't know if it's going to be very successful at all here in Ireland. I mean, because we've heard people on the chat facility week after week talk about the fighting Irish. Now, I mean, okay, maybe at one stage the Irish were the fighting Irish, but I think they've lost that fight. I think that flame has gone to maybe a glimmer of its former self. And I mean, we have these protests.
Well, it's true all over the world.
Oh yeah, I'm sure
They've
it's very
allowed
true.
these people through stealth to usurp their way of life, everything that they do. And it's not just Ireland, it's the United States, everywhere. I mean, I get letters from all over the world. We have thousands of subscribers outside the United States. And they have the same complaint. I will say for Greece, at least everybody gets out in the street. I mean, first of all, Papandreou is a communist. He's a member of the Bilderberger Group, and he is also a member of the Illuminati, as was his father, Andros, who was also a Marxist. The cabinet is loaded with people who are Bilderbergers. There's about 50 of them in the country. And they've been hog-tying that country for years. Not that they want to get into the race to be great producers of something, just that their way of life has been usurped by these people who can control things from behind the scenes. And the wealthy don't pay any taxes there, which is ludicrous.
Well, here's the thing. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
No, that's okay.
No, it's good to get your opinion on, you know, we're in the Euro, and there's a lot of countries obviously in Europe in the Euro, and I don't know how they can compare the GDP or the economy from Greece to Germany when they're completely two different countries in just completely two, you know, they're completely different. And this is the fear that we have, and people have said to me, what's going to happen to the Euro, because we're all on the same tightrope, and you can't compare apples with pears, because that's the way it is with some of these countries. I mean, the economy...
No, hold on a second. I know exactly what you're saying, and I've written about it for years. And I've lived in Europe for years, and I've been to Ireland, and many times as my ancestors came from there, and England and every place. Look, what this European Union, anthropologically, is an unnatural group of people who have been amalgamated and shoved together who don't like it one bit. Now, you go into Central Europe, in Germany, let's take. They have 4 versions of German. Now, why do they do that? Because they're tribal, just like every other nation is. And each region and section in every country in the world has those tribal differences. And it is stupid beyond belief to try to shove everybody into the same cone, so to speak. And that's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've said that from the very beginning. At Maastricht, what they did is they said every nation cannot exceed public debt of 3% of GDP. Well, they didn't have to go 6 months, and they were all over except Germany and a few other countries. Stupid. But what's even stupider was one interest rate fits all. And that fits more with what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Greece, as far as development is concerned, and you could say the same with Portugal, they have nothing as far as manufacturing to speak of. And it's mostly tourism. And I lived in Portugal. I lived in Spain, etc. And the point is this. You can't put these people together because they have absolutely nothing in common in any way. Whether that's commercially, manufacturing, arts, science, they're all different. And so sooner or later it's going to break up. And when it does, it's going to be very violent. Because people are mad, especially the Germans. And they're the big producers, and they got a large population. They're sick and tired of being blamed for World War II. And I don't blame them. And what are American and French and troops and British troops still doing in Germany? The war ended in 1945. I know, I was there just after that. I worked in Counter Intelligence. I spied on the Russians. And I did a good job at it, too. And, in fact, they were very good at what they did as well. And I find that the whole thing is crazy. And I think Europeans are finally deciding that. So what's going to happen to the euro? Sooner or later, it's going up the spout. It could take 2 years. It could take 10 years. I don't think so, but I think in the next 5 years, it's not going to work. The Germans never wanted it in the first place. And I can't blame them. They want the Deutschmark. They want their own currency.
Yeah.
And this is the exact opposite of what these one worlders want.
But so do we. We want
But
to...
Germany is sick and tired of being treated like the goat and have to supply everybody else with money. The game's over, one way or the other, in the next several years.
Mm. Yeah, we want to have our currency back, the Irish punt. We don't want, to be honest with you, we don't want to be in the euro. And people are concerned at the moment, saying that if the euro does go down, and it's, you know, like if you look at countries like Botswana, where they have $1 trillion notes and they're worth nothing. I mean, you know, when I heard the story.
In Zimbabwe?
That's right, yeah.
Incidentally, I used to live there when we had this the Rhodesian dollar. I lived there for 3 years, and what has happened is appalling. And you know, Britain and the United States stand by and let it happen.
Yeah.
So you got to say to yourself, why do they do that? They want them all to kill each other. That's why.
Yeah.
It's called population control.
Eugenics.
That's why it's allowed to go on.
Mm. Yeah, and we do know
and
that.
I had big business in Salisbury, incidentally, so I know lots about Africa.
Mm. Yeah, we do know that you want to depopulate the planet anyway, with their eugenics program, and we've talked about that. The questions that we've been asked really from listeners and people in general is just, what do they do with their savings? Where should they put it? If they don't want to, you know, have it in the bank because of the way the banks are at the moment, what currency should they put it into? Should they be buying gold?
None.
Should they be buying silver?
Gold and silver. You can either buy coins or bars or shares, and we have subscribers in Ireland, and if they can't find out where they can buy the shares, well, we'll send them to an American broker who can do business there. As far as gold and silver, they got to go to in the town that they live in, and if there's not a gold and silver dealer there, then they have to go to a place like Dublin, and I'm sure this deal is there. And generally speaking, that's the only place to go. It's the only safe place. Now, we just saw gold be manipulated by the Federal Reserve, the banks in New York, and the brokerage houses, as well as the U.S. government. $250 drop in 3 days. Mm. Now, look, I've been doing that for 53 years, and I was a specialist in that, and the largest in the world. And that does not happen. The only other time I saw something like that happen was at the Bank of England on October the 19th, 1987, which was the week of the hurricane. And I was at the Bank of England. Now, I saw the United States government manipulate the gold market for $100 an ounce. Well, that's history. That was illegal. What they're doing now is legal, if you can believe that. Manipulating markets 24/7.
Yeah.
And no matter what they do to gold and silver, it's going to keep on going up, because every currency in the world is fiat. Now, the exception is the euro has about 7% backing in gold, but it's minuscule. And so, look what they did to Swiss franc 3 weeks ago. I mean, I lived in Switzerland for 3 years. I went to the University de Genève, and I also lived in Zurich. And so I know the Swiss very well. I know their systems. What did they do? In order to compete with the euro, which was going lower, and their currency is going higher, they devalued their currency. The worst conceivable thing they could have done. Idiotic. And now, what they want to do is sell off the gold. And one of the parties, the Popular Party in Switzerland, is saying, we want to pass legislation to stop them from selling any gold. But so there's no currencies. The only place you're safe is gold and silver coins, bullion, and shares. Not certificates. You don't want them. And if you get gold and silver, you take delivery. Bring it in your home. Get some kind of a safe. Bury it in the garden. Whatever you want to do with it. But have it.
Yeah.
Because the currencies are all going to go down. For the last 11 and a half years, the 10 major currencies in the world have fallen more, on average, each year, against gold and silver, over 20% a year. I mean, what further proof do people need?
And is it year on year, Bob, this has been going on?
Well, I changed my people out of the stock market in the first week of April of 2000. And I started getting into gold and silver-related assets early June, about June 1st. And they made fortunes. I mean, last week I had 3 women I know of make over $1 million in 1 week.
Wow.
And the gold was going down.
Mm.
I mean, you just have to know what to invest in. And after more than half a century, I think I got it.
Yeah. That's incredible. We do have a couple of questions for you there, Bob. Pass off to Steve.
Yeah, Bob, a question here from Whitewashing. He's just wondering, would it be good for Ireland if Germany were to leave the euro?
Absolutely. Because everybody else would force to leave and you go back to the punt. And that's where you want to be. You don't want other people telling you what to do. You can make your own mistakes. I mean, look at your politicians did to the Irish people. We're putting them on the hook for all of the debt of the banks.
Yeah.
Give me a break. They're all foreign owned. Who cares about the Alpha Group and the royal families of Europe?
Well, they're obviously controlled. We had Brigitte Jones-Dieter on the show. She's an MP for the Icelandic government there, Bob. And what happened in Iceland is that the people were given a referendum, and they asked the people, do you want to pay back these banks? And obviously the people said no, and they didn't. So obviously the global elite tried to implement their template on Iceland. Iceland, it didn't work. So now they're trying it on Ireland. And of course, our stupid politicians, or whoever's behind it, is just kowtowing to the...
Stupid is not the word.
Okay.
They're paid off.
Yeah.
They're crooks.
Yeah. Okay.
It's as simple as that. I don't live in Ireland. I can say what I want.
Okay.
And that's the way I look at it.
Right.
You were sold down the river. And I hope this goes all over Ireland and it penetrates people's heads.
It will be. It will be. And, yeah, no, I totally agree. It doesn't surprise me. We've had crooked politicians before in our government, so there's no reason why we don't have them now.
Every government's got the same problem. They're under the same pressures from the same group of people. Believe me.
Yeah.
And you got to stand up on your hind legs and say no. And if you don't, you're going to live on your knees eternally.
Yeah. Now we had an election there at the start of the year, and we got another party in. But as somebody said to me, no matter how many parties are actually trying to get into government, you're guaranteed one thing: you'll get a government.
Well, you just got to keep on trying until you get some good people. And I don't think the group that took over did that well. I think they were a lesser version of the previous group.
Yeah.
And we'll see in time how they do. But they started off, I didn't like what they did at all. Who cares about the banks? Well, everybody loses their money, they lose it.
There was
including the banks.
Yeah, there was no guarantee put in place over here to pay the banks back that money. We didn't actually owe them that money. We didn't... I mean, okay, we're going to have a certain level of sovereign debt, which we have to pay, but not to the banks. As we've said before on the show, if you go into a betting shop and you bet on a horse and you lose, you don't go back in the next day and ask for your money back, because they'll only laugh at you. And this is what the banks have done. They did their gambling, they lent out so much money, which they shouldn't have, because the regulator was asleep at the wheel, and they lost millions, billions of money, of euros, and now they're coming back to the Irish people and saying, well, we want their money because we were too stupid to actually, know what was going on, that, they're going to lose the money. And of course the Irish taxpayer is now paying for it, and the country's in a really bad state at the moment over here.
They're getting the money back by any means necessary.
Yeah, definitely. And even people are losing their houses, the banks are just not playing ball at all. It's just ridiculous, Bob, over here.
So what you do is tell the banks to take a hike and let them go under. And the Irish people are going to lose money, but the banks are going to be gone. And you can form a national bank, issue your own currency, and tell them to get out and don't come back. Well, you'll get all the threats and everything like Greece has had. I mean, Greece, they're putting 200,000-300,000 people in the streets every day.
That's ridiculous.
They're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
They put a new tax on. People say we won't collect it. They've already put 80,000 businesses out of business. They're going to cut people's salaries 40 to 50%. they're going to cut the payout to retirees in half. Now, let me ask you a question. How can you have a recovery when your country has gone into a deep depression and revenues aren't coming in? You can't.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
And this is the mode of the IMF. And why do they do that? They do that so they can enslave the people.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah. So if there was a message to our politicians, Bob, you have the floor.
Well, they got it. They know what to do. If they don't do it, get rid of them. And until you do, get somebody in there that will do it right. And they don't have to be bankers or attorneys or whatever. I mean, businessmen can run governments. They run businesses.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of businessmen running governments as
I mean, common sense is common sense. I mean, in Ireland and in England and in Europe, you have a culture that dates back for thousands of years. You don't need anybody to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
These bankers who think that they are the masters of the universe, they know better what's good for everybody than everybody does, so they're going to tell everybody what to do. There's millions of brilliant people in the world who are far smarter than these creeps. Far smarter. And it's about time they got involved. Instead of worrying about making the next billion or becoming the head chair at some university or the head of some corporation. There's not any good having all these things unless you have control of your own country.
Yeah. Well, we did get some information through, Bob, from a person did talk to a politician, and he said that he was aware of what was going on, but because he had his nice salary and a nice pension, he wasn't going to rock the boat.
That's right. And they all do the same thing. It's just like the police force. You know, they go out and tell them to shoot everybody with green eyes, and they'll do it.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about every country in the world. And thank God America still has their weapons.
Yeah, well, we don't have
and
them
there are
over
other
here.
countries where you can have weapons, but if you can't have weapons, you're screwed.
Well, we can't have weapons. Well, we can get a license, but it's very hard getting a license.
Yeah.
Bob, we have
even if you get it, they'll come and collect it if they see trouble.
Yeah, straight away. We have another question for you, Bob. It's just about what's your take on, America owes a lot of dollars, a lot of money to the Chinese, and I know the global elite look at the Chinese communist country as a template, as the way they want the rest of the world to be, because it's communism. What's your take on that?
Well, I think the price of acceptance, most favored nation, country, and the ability to enter all markets put China in a different position than they ever been before. And the ticket, the payment for that, was their biggest customer was going to be, and is, the United States. So they knew that they were going to accumulate gazillions of dollars. And now they've got them.
Yeah.
Now they say, well, we supplied with you the goods that you needed at cheap prices, kept inflation down in your country, but you've ruined your economies. Well, what the Chinese can't figure out, and it's pretty simple, they were part of the reason that the countries were ruined. It's called free trade, globalization, offshoring, and outsourcing, and Ireland's put up with it, particularly England and Europe. So what they've done is they moved the good jobs to the third world, mostly to China. So the ability of a populace to pay back money that's owed to the Chinese and others, and that's about 60% of foreign reserves of all nations in the world are in U.S. dollars, that ability doesn't exist and never will. So nobody's going to get paid back.
No.
And that's why, again, you don't want to be in any currency. The yuan's no better than the Swiss franc, or the Norwegian kroner, or the Australian dollar. Reasonably strong currencies.
Yeah.
That's why you can't be in there. Now, you do have to have money to run a business and run a household. Paper money.
Yeah.
But the money you don't need has to be in gold and silver, And you should put food away in the larder. I don't know what your availability in Europe is for dehydrated and freeze-dried foods, but they last for years and years.
Yeah.
We have them.
Well, we
And a water filter.
I
mean, that alone.
Yeah, we are doing that, Bob. At the moment, there is a number of people that we know of, and ourselves, we have actually started to store food and put food away and medical supplies and all that. And I've noticed from surfing the internet and going on YouTube that there's a lot of people in America also doing that as well, and probably globally they're doing it, because you don't know what's around the corner. You're the second person who has come on. Lindsay Williams came on the show, and Lindsay said that start storing your food and make sure you have about 6 months food, 3 months money. Now, we said initially the money will have value, but over a short period of time the money won't be worth anything, and you'll have to start bartering. But he said initially have some currency there just to kind of get you by. But he just said,
and I agree.
Yeah, because
I tell my people $5,000 cash in the safe and small bills, and 6 months or more. My family has 2.5 years.
Wow.
And I got 3 different water filters in case one breaks down. And in America, you can have weapons, so we've got lots of them.
Yeah, no, that's our main concern, because obviously people who are hungry and are not ready for this, if it does go down and it does collapse, that, they will kick your door down and do what they have to do to feed themselves. And this is what the concern is. Obviously, we don't have weapons over here, so we'll have to try and make do with what we can. But it's great that you actually you've kind of confirmed what Lindsay Williams has said and what other people have said in the background about storing food. Look, if nothing happens, you have extra food, you save yourself a couple of quid. But if something does happen, it's better to have it.
Well, I bought 2.5 years ago this current batch, and it's doubled in price.
Wow.
So it's a good investment. That's not what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But it's insurance
is
what it is.
Yeah.
And, everybody from time to time loses their job.
Yeah.
It's nobody's fault. And, at least you can eat.
Yeah, definitely. But see, the system in the States, when it comes to when people start losing their house, I think your system, you can give them the key and then walk away from your house. But over here in Ireland, you give them the key, they'll still chase you for the rest of the money.
And really, that's the way it should be. And they should have never had the leverage in housing in the first place by giving these tax breaks to the interest that you paid on your loan. It's stupid. You go into Central Europe, yes, you've had borrowing, and particularly in Spain and Portugal, and it's turned into real problems, just like it has in Ireland. But you go to, these are the backward countries now. We'll get down to Mexico, Central, and South America. What do? They pay cash.
Yeah.
They don't have any housing horrible things happening. I mean, once it's built and it's paid for, you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's it's just a pity we've come to that. But we're coming to the end, Bob. And do you have any words of wisdom that anything on a positive note that you can give our listeners?
Well, now that gold and silver have gone down, rush in and buy, because it's going right back up again. And this is the third prediction I've made like in 6 weeks. The first 2 were right because it went down and went back up again. And it's going to do it again. They can't control it.
Yeah.
They just can't control it. There's too many people all over the world, particularly in Europe and Asia and India and places like that, Russia, even, can you believe, Mexico bought 100 tons of gold. So it's going on all over the world. Get in there while it's cheap. And as you know, I don't get paid to do this.
Yeah.
This is what I do for me.
Yeah.
Now, tomorrow morning, which will come much quicker for you than I will be buying more gold and silver for myself and my family.
Yeah. We had some information there in the chat facility a little while ago, Bob, in relation to buying gold and silver. And someone did say that I think it was a figure of €450 French are restricting the sale of gold and silver to €450. I don't know if that's per person or per family, but obviously that.
Well, that was Austria and one of the banks, and it's untrue.
It's untrue. So if we have the money, we can.
And I'm sorry to say, I carried it, thinking the bank wouldn't make a story up, and they did. And things like that happen. I can't be perfect all the time.
Yeah, no.
But no, you can get as much. You take the plane to Vienna, and you get as much Philharmonics and in gold and silver and all those Franz Joseph, the Coronas, and all of that. There are plenty of them available.
Okay, I'll tell you what, Bob. We're coming to the end. I'll pass you over to Steve, and Steve, you do your finishing up bit if you want.
Okay, Bob. As was with the last time you were on the show, it's now if you can just give us a few minutes of your time, and maybe if you have a book, DVD, or your website where people can find out some more information about you and your work and your investigation, Bob.
With the exception of my publication, I don't sell anything. I don't get paid by anybody for anything. That's a good start. If you want to know about the publication, it's about business, finance, economic, social, and political issues all over the world, published by email on Wednesdays and Saturdays, runs around 40 pages each time. We have a hard copy that goes out twice a month, which you wouldn't be interested in Ireland, at least, because it takes too long to get there, so you want to do it on the Internet. But we do have that for Americans and Canadians and so on. You can get a free introductory copy. Just go to the site, and that address is theinternationalforecaster.com. The International, FORECASTER.com. You can also go to www.intforecaster.com. Intforecaster.com. For those of you who would like to ask a question, we answer everyone.
Excellent.
Believe me, I answer over 300 emails a day.
Wow.
And don't ask me how I do it. And you can get a free copy. And if you'd like a recent report, free, on gold and silver shares, we'll send it to you. And if you want a broker, we'll send you that too, which we have no financial involvement with. And you do that by emailing us, bob@intforecaster.com, bob@intforecaster.com. And for those of you who can use a 800 number, you can call 877-479-8178. That's 877-479-8178. It's a toll-free number. You can get copies of the publication there. And also, they offer a free one-year subscription. And the deal that they're offering is really terrific. So if you want to become a subscriber, you should get in touch with them.
Excellent. Bob, just very, very, very quickly, one of our listeners wants to know how long the Bank of America will last.
That is a real hard question, because I thought it would go under a year ago. What they did is they dumped all the garbage in there, all the bad loans and Countrywide and all of that other stuff. And it's a wonder they're still in business. In fact, last July, a year ago July, the Fed secretly gave them piles of money. And they're going to do it again, I think. They want to keep it afloat. It's one of their major banks, too big to fail. And so maybe it won't go under. But I'll tell you, right now, they are insolvent. And so on most of the major banks in the United States and in Europe, including Deutsche Bank.
Yeah.
They're broke.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Sogen and Agricola and some of the other banks in Paris. I can't include Paribas because it's run by the Rothschilds, and they have an endless stream of money.
Yeah. That's incredible.
They get it all from Irish banks, incidentally.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Yeah, I think they're on the list of the senior bondholders,
That's right.
which one of our TDs stood up in our government meeting, and he wanted to tell the taxpayers who the senior bondholders were, and he was told to sit down. That's none of their business. So that's the kind
Unbelievable.
and then.
Well, there's an old saying that you get the kind of government you deserve. And if these people in all these different countries wait until they're all starving and their homes have been taken away and they've got nothing to look forward to because they have no jobs, you've got to have revolution. And it's better you cut them off at the pass by taking them out of office and changing the rules, because if you don't do that, you're not going to like war. It's horrible.
Yeah. I think well, it's good information for the people of Ireland, and hopefully people will hear this and listen to the show and take on your advice, and we all do something about it, because if we don't, then as you say, we get the government that we deserve. But Bob, listen, thank you very much for coming on the show. Much appreciated. Really enjoyed your what you had to say there, and hopefully we'll have to do something about it. So we appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much, and anytime you want me back, just let me know.
Brilliant. That's great, Bob. Bob, just stay with us there for a minute, and we'll just go to a musical break and we'll be back in a minute.
Open your mind.